JC here again for retirecheap.asia. You know, one of the things that I'm always harping about, at the end of my videos you hear it, there's always an option. And for some people, the options are getting to be less and less. And so I wanted to talk about a disturbing article that somebody had sent me. And this was actually from Yahoo. I miss Yahoo's. Anyway, Yahoo Finance, where there was a person who was a medical survivor, a cancer survivor, who got a $280 medical bill and was told that she didn't have to pay it. And anyway, the bill kept coming. People kept saying, "Well, you don't need to pay for it." And anyway, they turned it over to a collection agency, and state troopers showed up and arrested the lady and took her to jail in handcuffs. And so the interesting thing about this is, you know, this is actually what we call debtor prison, where people owed money and they would get arrested and thrown in jail. Now, this was abolished in the 1830s, and it's interesting that it's resurfacing again. And the challenge is that as local municipalities get tighter and tighter on their budgets and their money, they're looking for ways to supplement this income. And this seems to be one of the ways that they're doing this. And so there's an interesting dynamic taking place. So I want to read you a little bit about what happened in this article, but you know, well, I'll talk about my opinion about this at the end. But anyway, so the police now, U.S., more than a third of the states in the U.S. are hauling people off to jail who don't pay debt. This goes from bills from health care, credit card payments, auto loans, and in parts of Illinois, debt collectors commonly use publicly funded courts. Sheriff's deputies, county jails to pressure people who owe even small amounts of money to pay up. Under the law, though, debtors are not arrested for non-payment, but rather for failing to respond to court hearings, pay legal fines, or otherwise showing contempt of court. So what's happening is they're converting this over to the charge of contempt of court, which is actually you can be arrested for. So that's how they're doing it. It's sort of a loophole. So lawmakers, to give somebody credit, lawmakers in the Illinois House of Representatives are concerned enough to try and pass a bill that would make it illegal to send residents of that state to jail if they can't pay a debt. And so that's awaiting action in the Senate right now. So it says creditors have been manipulating the court systems to extract money from the unemployed, veterans, and even seniors who solely rely on their benefits that they get each month. Now here's people that really don't have any money to start with, and there's pressuring these people, and if they don't pay up, out come the handcuffs. So this is getting pretty scary. The Illinois Attorney General last month in a statement voicing support for the legislation said too many people have been thrown into jail simply because they're too poor to pay their debts, and that they can't allow this kind of abuse to continue, which I agree with wholeheartedly. But Illinois is not the only state where residents are getting locked up for owing money. In a 2010 report, the American Civil Liberties Union focused on 5 states, Georgia, Louisiana, Michigan, Ohio, and Washington. And they found people were being jailed at increasingly, this is a quote, increasingly alarming rates over legal debts. Cases range from a woman who was arrested, listen to this, 4 separate times for failing to pay a $251 fine and court costs related to a 4th degree misdemeanor conviction. And they also arrested a mentally ill juvenile who was jailed by a judge over a previous conviction for stealing school supplies. According to the ACLU, the sad truth is that debtors' prisons are flourishing today. More than 2 decades after the Supreme Court prohibited imprisoning people that are too poor to pay their legal debts. In this area of shrinking budgets, state and local governments have turned aggressively to using the threat and reality of imprisonment to squeeze revenue out of the poorest defendants who appear in the courts. So this is not a good thing. I mean, these people already, you know, destitute. They're running out of options. And once you put them in jail or arrest them, their options even become more limited. So they also are applying what's called poverty penalties, which includes late fees, payment plan fees, and interest. So what does that do? That just piles on more debt onto these people, which means what? Are they going to be able to get a job? No, there's no way. Alabama charges a 30% collection fee. Florida allows listen to this, allows private debt collectors to add a 40% surcharge onto the original debt. Now, if you can't pay the original debt, how are you going to add a 40% surcharge onto it and have these people be expected to pay this? This is absurd. And debtors can be jailed but have no rights to a public defender. Interesting, eh? Amazing. And these are actually called so-called collection courts, where they're being turned over to these collection courts where they don't have a right to a public defender. Many states are imposing new and often onerous user fees on individuals with criminal convictions. The authors of the Brennan Center report wrote, "Far from easy money, these fees impose severe and often hidden costs on communities, on taxpayers, and on indigent people convicted of crimes. They create new paths to prison for those unable to pay their debts and make it harder to find employment and housing, as well as to meet child support obligations." These practices have been heightened in recent years by the effects of recession, amount to criminalizing poverty, say critics, and urging federal authorities to intervene. Most people are unemployed. More people are struggling financially, and more creditors are trying to get their debt paid, which is creating this challenge. Now, there was a philosopher called Lao Tzu, and he was born in 604 BC. He actually wrote the verses for what now is called the Tao Te Ching, and which is a set of rules, basically, of how to live life. And it's been translated more times than any other book except the Bible. And so there's some wisdom that's being passed down over and over, or else it wouldn't be getting translated over and over. So anyway, he said that governments should rule people like cooking a small fish, that you shouldn't mess with it too much or it'll fall apart. And this is sort of what's happening that I see in certain Western countries, and I won't specifically name any, but they're messing with the people so much. Now, I get, information passing across my desk constantly. There's going to be thousands of unmanned drones circling the U.S. in the next few years. They're outfitting local law enforcement with militia gear. Now, this is all out riot gear in small towns, and giving them armored personnel carriers and stuff. So they're outfitting them like militia. And the writing's on the wall that there's going to be civil unrest. The government's preparing for this. Now, why would that happen? Well, the thing about it is, it's sort of like water in your hand. If you pour water in your hand, you can cup your hand and hold the water. But the more you squeeze the water, the less water you have. And this is sort of what's happening to people now. They're getting squeezed too tight. And what's going to happen is sort of like a pressure cooker, putting pressure inside a pot and not having a way for it to get out. The pressure to get out is going to eventually explode. And I think this is what the government's seeing on the writing on the wall. Now, the thing about this is it's sort of like, as things, I reference a lot to Thailand about, when things get tight over here, they start raising the prices and stuff, which is sort of counterproductive. They should be giving people incentives of making things easier, but they want to keep that bottom line the same. So they actually think, well, we'll just increase the price and we'll make the same amount of money next month. They don't understand marketing and creating promotions and things like that to get more people to come, maybe make a little less money, but sell more. Just to get income flowing in. And this is sort of what's happening now, that I see that the government is squeezing the people to get that money. And what's happening is it's building up more and more unhappiness and less options for people. Until when there are no options, then what happens? Then there's a big challenge. And what needs to happen. And I know it's sort of counterproductive or sort of a paradox, but all these regulations and rules need to be lifted and make it easier for people to, like the debtors here, the people that owe money. Why not give them a job? Say, look, you owe this money, you got to pay it. Here, we're going to give you a job and allow you to pay this off. So we'll give you $6 an hour. You get to live off 4 of it, 2 of it's going to go towards your debt. Something like this. We should have, instead of bailing out, banks and things like that, we should have created jobs. The rules and regulations that we put into place for small business had made it so, what our country was founded on, the U.S. was founded on, was entrepreneurship. People came from European countries because, America was the place to go make your fortune. And it was back then. It was easy to show up with little or no money and create a business and be successful. But now only the rich can do that because there's so many rules and regulations. I've owned restaurants, created concept restaurants. And from the inception of the idea to the opening of the doors, it's sort of like running for president. It's almost impossible. Nobody wants to do it because it's a torture. It's a gauntlet of problems that you have to go through. And they make it so difficult to comply. And I actually once had a restaurant open and a health inspector came by and everything was perfect. And they wrote me up for something and I said, well, it's like, the people were delivering the food and a bag of potatoes went on the floor for a second while, they tore off the bill and then it was put up on a shelf. And they said, well, I have to write something. And I'm like, no, you don't. But that was her job as a health inspector. She can't go around saying, oh, everything's good, or she'd have no job. And see, this is a challenge. Lawmakers are lawmakers. They have to make laws. So we're piling more and more laws on, which are squeezing the people more and more. And making everybody into criminal. You don't need police, you don't need enforcement for honest people. But what's happening now is we're making more and more people dishonest and making more and more people criminals because of all the laws that these people have to comply to. And then, of course, we need more police action because everybody's a criminal. And see, this is what's happening. And so we need to reverse this. We're circling the drain. So to speak, and this can be turned around, but it takes people with a lot of insight and wisdom to do it. And it doesn't seem like we've got too many of those people now. Everybody seems to have an agenda, and they're very short-sighted. You got to go back to Japan when Japan realized that, let's make cars that last. Yeah, we won't sell as many to start with every year, but eventually we'll sell more and more because we'll gain a reputation. And we got to start out and maybe even have less money to start with, but allow people to go out there and create business, relax the laws, relax the fees, allow people to become an entrepreneur again, and let it become self-policing for a while. And that way it'll put money back into the economy flowing again, and we can turn all this stuff around. But the direction things are headed now is really, really bothersome. People are ending up with no options, and this isn't a good thing. And so I'm just voicing my opinion over this article. So I hope nobody's taking offense to this. It's just my opinion, and a lot of people won't agree. But from over where I see it, from where I live, where people can have an idea one day and open up a business the next day, it adds a lot of freedom and entrepreneurship and money flowing in the economy, and it seems to be working quite well. So I think we need to think about that. When I first came over to Thailand over 10 years ago, I had a shop and I sold products and did some seminars, and I created T-shirts. And the shop was called Wisdom Shop, and we had these T-shirts. And on back of one of the T-shirts in both Thai and English, it says I not only came to see Asia, but also to see my own country with a new set of eyes. And I think that everybody needs to look beyond the borders here and look to see, appreciate what we do have, but also to see what we've lost and what we're missing and bring that back. All students should be required to do a student exchange program. It should be required because those are the lawmakers, those are the people with the vision for our future as a country. And so I hope that I haven't bored you with my ranting. But some of the stuff that's crossing my desk is really disturbing, and I don't want everybody to be fleeing to other countries, and that's happening. And yet, I know that the reason that people are coming and live in other countries can be avoided by some action being taken on behalf of lawmakers and citizens. Remember now, it's in your hands to be able to change this. So if you're not interested in living someplace where you got to learn a new language and live in a different culture, then stand up and voice an opinion. Remember, we need to put the lawmakers back into office that we want, as opposed to the small choice that we get. We really should have the choice of who we want in government offices, and at this point, it's really somebody else is sort of determining what our choices are, and that's not really a cool thing. But anyway, hope that's been helpful when it comes to government and how to take care of the people. Remember, there's always